When park-goers exited the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in the late 1960s, they were amazed by just how realistic the animatronics looked. Their movements, for that day and age, were frighteningly lifelike. I wonder if they would have been just as amazed to learn that the skeletons used as props throughout the ride were in fact real skeletons on loan from UCLA Medical Center. Hello, my name is John, and in this episode, we'll be diving deeper into the spookier side of the Disney theme parks. So grab your crucifix and bundle up some wolfsbane. This is Moonlight Madness. When referring to one of the Disney theme parks, we usually say it's the happiest place on earth. So it's no wonder that not many people are familiar with the darker side of Disney lore. Like many other theme parks, Disneyland in California and Walt Disney World in Florida both have their ghost stories and their urban legends, but it's hard to make a fair comparison when considering the sheer scale and reach that the Disney company has. Walt Disney opened the original Disneyland theme park on Sunday, July 7th, 1955. The idea came from Disney's vision for a park where adults and children could visit and enjoy the various attractions together. It would be the only park designed and built with direct input from Disney himself, but his idea for what was called the Florida Project at the time had already begun taking shape. Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida would see its opening on October 1st, 1971, 5 years after Disney's death. It would mark the beginning of what is to this day an incredibly profitable organization. That park alone brings in nearly 52 million yearly visitors, so the operation must run with military precision. From something as simple as employees being referred to as cast members, down to the micromanaging of the way cast members must point out directions using either 2 fingers or a full hand, there's a very watchful eye over everything that goes on in the Disney parks. Part of what goes into this tightly run operation is an elaborate system of tunnels that run beneath the parks. When a character goes on break, they're taken behind a cast members only door and led down into these tunnels. There, they'll find a dressing room or some other kind of break room to help them freshen up between meet and greets. This is how characters are able to virtually teleport from one end of the park to the other without taking the magic out of it. Think of it like Jason Voorhees mysteriously teleporting around Camp Crystal Lake. This also helps the park to avoid having 2 of the same characters bump into one another. The point is, if you're seeing it, it's because the park wants you to see it. With a tunnel system connecting different sections of the park that most people are unaware of, it's no wonder that we've long heard ghost stories and urban legends about what happens behind the scenes at the Disney parks. The stories range from the based on a true story variety to campfire tales about ghosts, but each one is given an extra boost in creepiness when one considers the setting. If I said "It's a Small World After All," chances are you're gonna have that song stuck in your head for the next couple of hours. So, let's take that sweet little song and give you a nice haunting tale to associate it with. On an otherwise regular day, the It's a Small World ride came to a sudden stop. For those who've experienced it, you know that a ride breaking down will make you anxious. You're asking yourself what's going on and if the ride could suddenly start up again if you tried to get off. In this case, cast members announced they were evacuating the ride for safety concerns and began ushering people off the ride. One patron noticed something strange just above them. They were so shocked, they pulled out their camera and snapped a picture of what at first looked like one of the ride's dolls hanging from the ceiling. They didn't realize what it actually was until they had a chance to re-examine the picture once they got off the ride. To their horror, they realized they were looking at the picture of a person hanging from the rafters, the ride's small dolls just below their dangling feet. Most people take this as nothing more than a sick story. But what about the picture? A quick Google search will bring up the image so that you can judge for yourself. Sometimes it's odd numbers in a group, other times you just get separated from your friends. The point is, anyone who's been to Disney has had to go on a ride alone at least once in their life. Luckily, there's a ghost on Space Mountain who likes to make sure that single riders don't get lonely. Some people refer to him as Mr. Wedway, the ghost of a man who died while building the ride in the 1970s. It's said that he can be seen taking up an empty seat next to a single rider, only to fall out of the seat during a particularly heart-stopping drop. Patrons have exited screaming about more than just the ride, saying they know they had someone sitting next to them 1 minute, and the next minute, they were gone. There's also one person who refuses to leave. Before his death, Walt Disney took up residence in an apartment on Main Street in Disneyland. One night, as a cast member was cleaning Disney's old apartment, she snuffed out the lantern by the window. She continued cleaning, only to turn around and see the lantern was lit up once again. After snuffing it out a second time, she heard a voice say, "Don't forget, I'm still here." And she watched, mouth open, as the lantern relit itself. Now, the lantern in the window of the firehouse apartment is kept lit to remind everyone that Walt Disney's spirit is more than happy to stick around and keep an eye on his park. It's amazing to me that there's so many haunting stories about the Disney parks. Maybe it's some sort of need to find darkness in the brightest of places. After all, we can't have one without the other. And this brings me to our next subject, the Disney Creepypasta. Creepypastas are campfire ghost stories for the internet age. The best part is, because they're so easily and enthusiastically shared, there are archives filled with spooky tales. And yes, one of the community's favorite subjects is the Disney Creepypasta. So, to close out this episode, here's an excerpt from one of my favorites, Abandoned by Disney, by Slimebeast. Enjoy. What I found odd and what I wanted to photograph right away was a Mickey Mouse costume at the center of the room. Unlike the other costumes, it was lying on its back in the center of the floor like a murder victim. The fur on the costume was rotten and shedding, creating bare patches. What was even more odd, however, was the coloring of the costume. It was like a photo negative of the actual Mickey Mouse. Black where it should be white and white where it should be black. His normal red pants were light blue. The sight was off-putting enough that I actually postponed photographing the thing until last. I took a picture of the costumes hanging on the walls. Upward angles, downward angles, side shots to show an entire row of frozen, putrid cartoon faces, some with plastic eyes missing. Then I decided to stage a shot. Just one of the bedraggled character heads on a slick, grimy floor. I reached for the headpiece of a Donald Duck costume and carefully removed it so the thing wouldn't fall apart in my hands. As I looked into the face of the wide-eyed, moldering head, a loud clattering sound made me jump with fright. I looked down at my feet, and there between my shoes was a human skull. It had fallen out of the mascot head and shattered into pieces at my feet, only the empty face and lower jaw remaining, staring up at me. I dropped the duck head immediately, as you'd expect, and moved for the door. As I stood in the doorway, I looked back to the skull on the floor. I had to take a picture of it, you know? I had to. For any number of reasons that may seem silly, but only if you didn't think it through. I'd need proof of what happened, especially if Disney was going to somehow make this go away. I had no doubt in my mind right from the start that even if it was just gross negligence, Disney was responsible for this. This was why the resort had closed, and I was the only one outside Disney Co. who knew. Me. That's when Mickey, that photo negative opposite Mickey, in the middle of the floor, started to get up. First sitting up, then climbing to its feet, the Mickey Mouse costume, or whoever was inside of it, stood there at the center of the room, its fake face just staring directly at me as I mumbled no, over and over and over. With shaking hands, a violently thrashing heart, and legs that had once again turned to jelly, I managed to lift the camera and aim it at the opposite creature now quietly sizing me up, head tilted. The digital camera's screen displayed only dead pixels in the shape of the thing. It was a perfect silhouette of the Mickey costume. As the camera moved in my unsteady hands, the dead pixels spread, marring the screen wherever Mickey's outline moved to. Then the camera died, went blank and quiet and broken. I raised my eyes once again to the Mickey Mouse costume. "Hey," it said in a hushed, perverted but perfectly executed Mickey Mouse voice. "Want to see my head come off?" It started to pull at its own head, working its clumsy glove-clad fingers around its neck with clawing, impatient movements similar to that of a wounded man trying to pull himself free from a predator's jaws. As it worked its digits into its neck, so much blood, so much thick, curdled, yellow blood. I turned away as I heard a sickening tearing of cloth and flesh, only cared about getting away. Above the doorway out of this room, I saw the final message clawed into the metal with bone or fingernails. Abandoned by God. I never got the pictures out of the camera. I never wrote the blog entry about it. After I ran from that place, fled for my sanity, if not my very life, I knew Walt Disney didn't want anyone to know about this place. They didn't want anyone like me getting in. They didn't want anything like that getting out. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Moonlight Madness. If you enjoy what you saw, hit subscribe and leave us a thumbs up. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at moonlightmadness_TV. So until next time, this is John reminding you to keep that crucifix close and beware the moon.